visitor to Calcutta. They had conducted a joint study. They wanted to debate or to analyze what should be the index of economic development. When you open the newspapers, every day you will find rate of growth, GDP growth, things like that. But after deliberating for 3 years, they came to the conclusion that the index of economic growth should be the Human Development Index. So they are trying to bring a transition in the thinking of planners. Today when we look back, we turn back the pages of history, we must understand that our various planning processes and the priorities we had set did not generate that self-sustained growth that we wanted. But it seems that in the planning process, in the mechanisms that we have for planning, there is no accountability. Planning must have accountability. Today, if I am in charge, I plan something and I find it flops in the end, doesn't deliver, there should be accountability. So there in our country, I find there is no accountability. From time to time, we keep on changing. Today, you find the Reserve Bank and the Finance Ministry are at loggerheads. Why should this happen? If this continues to happen, we will be the laughing stock of the world. We need to get our act together. It's not happening. You look at, I'm talking about renewable energy, how renewable energy sources should slowly vie to replace other forms of energy like thermal energy, etc. You look at Germany, I think, as an example. In fact, in Germany, they have decided to discontinue their nuclear power plants. By 2032, they want to phase out all their nuclear power plants. What happened in Chernobyl was a disaster of gigantic proportions. Because of the tight controls that the Russian government exercises on the media, not much of it was able to come out. But Fukushima was the last straw. Because after Fukushima, there was a panic in many of those nations who depend on nuclear power, in Europe mostly, and Germany have decided to phase out their nuclear power plants and depend more and more on renewable energy. That is solar energy, mostly solar energy. And by that, what they are talking about is reduce the consumption of energy, conserve energy. So they are in, I think, in the next 15 years, they want to bring in about 6 million electric vehicles all over Germany. They want to reduce consumption of conventional fuels, bring in non-conventional energy as a substitute. That's a very bold move, and they, being a highly industrialized nation, are able to access the technologies that are required. In renewable energy today, although like when you get sunshine from the sky, you don't have to pay any tax. Up till now, nobody will tax you, say that you have to pay me 1% for getting the sunshine for your power. It hasn't happened as yet. I hope it doesn't happen. It should be free. But then we always look for sources of revenue. And anybody has a solar plant, you pay me 1%. The state has the power to demand that, although it is coming from the sky or the sun. So we need to take bold moves in renewable energy. We have, in this state, we are trying to launch a very large solar rooftop scheme spread over all the cities and go in for more regulations to bring in solar power in new buildings, commercial buildings, large domestic complexes and industry. In that way, we hope that once the movement catches on, of course, again, when we bring solar, house-top solar, we have to provide for subsidies. And the National Solar Mission is providing for such subsidies. And the prospects look very bright at this point. because that is the solar scene is changing all over the world. More and more improved technologies are available. You are having revolutionary equipment, revolutionary materials that are being developed, so that the low efficiency of solar power systems can be enhanced. And in this process, climatic change can be reduced to the minimum. But the fact is that there's always a silver lining. Because the earth, if you look back 20 years, 30 years, we have always been talking about climate change, etc. But you must have noticed that except for untimely rains and a little bit of flooding here and there, the earth has the resilience to absorb to a great extent the pollution that is being caused by man-made systems and processes. So there is no need to lose heart. You should keep a cheerful face that the earth, land, water, our mountains, seas and rivers have the capacity to exhibit a resilience which shows that over the years, the earth itself is adjusting to these processes. What we have to do is that we have to join hands with Mother Nature to bring about a sea change in our energy consumption patterns. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful address. And we are really encouraged in your emphasis on the utilization and the development of renewable energy as a measure of energy security. We are expecting the arrival of Dr. Parikh. He is on the way. We shall be receiving him at any minute. Yeah. Okay. He will be leaving. Okay. If you have any question for our Honorable Minister, then you can ask now, because he will be leaving otherwise. Yeah. The speaker, please.
This is for...
Just introduce yourself and then ask.
My name is Sujan Pandit and I am Secretary of Society for Environment and Development. This question is for the Honorable Minister, dear sir. I would like to ask, West Bengal was one of the pioneers in the development of renewable energy. But over the years, the share of renewable energy of West Bengal as a percentage of the total modern renewable energy, apart from hydroelectricity, has been falling and now forms less than 1% of the total renewable energy in India. Why has West Bengal lost its preeminence compared to states like Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra and Gujarat over the last decade?
You can sit down, I'll take your question. You see, even in 2030, for example, let us take a dateline. Even in 2030, in the energy mix that we'll have in this country, the share of renewable energy will only be 4 to 6%. See, it's not a very encouraging percentage that has been forecast. This is a forecast done by the Planning Commission. 4 to 6% of the total energy mix in India by 2020 will only be 4 to 6%. You see, renewable energy is a high cost solution at this time. It's an essential solution, but a high cost solution. And we need to, I'm sure that technologies are changing, they are improving, we are having better technologies, could be. And we should be optimistic that maybe in the future, we'll be able to develop technologies in the world in which we can make a quantum jump in the use of renewable sources of energy. As far as you are talking about West Bengal being a leader, yes. You see, the main source of renewable energy in West Bengal, if you take all the various sources put together, today we are producing 193 megawatts of renewable power. And our target by the end of the 12th plan is 1040 megawatts. Most of it is solar power. Now solar power, you see, is concentrated in the districts which have higher radiation, that is Bankura and Purulia. Now the radiation is now being studied. Measuring stations have been set up. They have to take these measurements for 3 years. So once that is cleared, we'll know the efficiency of the solar systems that we intend to put up. Depending on that, we would expect that private sector investments would come in. We are trying to get that going, and I'm sure that in the next 2-3 years, you will see a sea change in the harnessing of renewable energy sources.
Yes, please.
To Honorable Minister, I've got 2 questions. One is, what is the policy for
Please
nuclear
introduce
energy?
yourself.
I'm BP Sarkar from a technical journal publisher. What is the West Bengal government's policy towards generation of power through nuclear energy? And number 2, what is the scope of wind energy at Digha?
Our second part I didn't get. Second part?
Second question is, what is the possibility of generating wind power at Digha region?
You are all perhaps aware that the state government is opposed to setting up nuclear energy facilities in the state. So there's no point discussing that part of it, but I have dwelt on this nuclear energy to some extent. And many other countries, as I've told you, Germany, Spain, others, they are phasing out nuclear energy because they say that it is an energy source which is not risk-free. Instead of going into a long debate on that, it is not risk-free. And hence, that is one of the reasons that in this state, we have not opted for nuclear energy. Regarding wind power, we are now at a stage where we have identified 1 or 2 mega wind power projects. One is near Digha and another is on the other side of the coast. Now, wind power, before you set up wind power, you have to do an investigation. There are a height of 50 meters. What is the effect of the wind? There are seasonal changes in wind. You see, what has happened in Chennai, they had set up a mega wind power project on the coast. They spent 36,000 crores to set up facilities to generate 1,800 megawatts. It was a pioneering effort. And we are all very hopeful that it was something that could be emulated elsewhere in India. I had just the other day gone to a conference in which the minister was sitting next to me, and I told him that you've done a great job in being able to implement such a huge project. And this is the answer to our energy problems. He told me that they had run into difficulties because of, again, it goes full circle, because of a climate change, because of a change in the weather patterns, because in the change of the wind pattern, the windmills were not generating as much energy as they were supposed to when they had initially planned the project. So they were running into losses and unable to pay back the loans they had taken to implement the project. So there are certain uncertainties also in renewable energy.
Yeah, the last
Sir,
question.
hello. Sir, I am Rahul Mandal, student, Jadavpur University.
I have got one inquiry. Atomic energy is flourishing many parts of India. I was associated with it from 1961. Now we are going to have almost 10,000 megawatt by end of 12-hour plan. Now Haripur or Hirapur in East Midnapur was selected. Initially previous government was not liking it, then they accepted. Now, why we are so much scared about atomic energy when we know in France 75% is atomic energy. Then in Japan it is almost 50%. Then in the United States it is 40%. Chernobyl is an isolated case. It was very backward at that time. There are specific reasons. There is also in this what happened in Fukushima and Japanese, but they have not stopped all nuclear powers. They are generating also. So this is inhibition only West Bengal is having. We had an office here in Nuclear Power Corporation. It has been closed. I think last time I had spoken to Mr. Chatterjee, your industry ministry. I had given a note also. But somehow he said we are against, as a party, we are not for it. Although not now, maybe after 5-10 years, if you continue, he will come around. This is one. Another is non-conventional energy. This solar energy is the most renewable energy. Now the other day, Kalam came here. He said, why not we have this energy grid independent? It can be developed without grid. In all over our countryside, either it is thermal, solar thermal or solar photovoltaic cell. Both the cases are there. Now I feel this West Bengal government, instead of simply telling that we have this, we should go very specific, time-bound program. Then only I think we shall be able to go forward. Thank you very much for giving me patience hearing.
We will certainly consider your advice because we are always open to suggestions. And in any setup, especially in the government, we have to keep an open mind. But of course, your criticism of the government's inability to accept nuclear power is, I've already said that we have decided that we will not. But as far as you had said that Japan, I think you may like to check your facts on two issues. In the world today, even if you look at the internet, you will find that every year there are 300 to 400 nuclear accidents, small and big. They are not publicized. All the nuclear plants that are operating in the world are having small and big and medium-sized accidents, 300 to 400 of them every year. And as far as Japan is concerned, after Fukushima, there has been a debate in Japan, raging over a long period of time, and they took a public vote on that, a public poll, in which 80% of Japanese have ruled out nuclear power, and they said they should be phased out. Please check the facts. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question. I am Rahul Mandal, student Jadavpur University Mechanical Engineering Department. Sir, I would like to ask you, is there any integrated policy approach towards research? Is there any policy approach towards research and development on renewable source of energy in our state from your government?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, Planning Commission has emphasized, the task force set up by the Planning Commission had emphasized that R&D is a very, very important part of harnessing renewable energy. So we are exchanging, you see, we can't reinvent the wheel. We are exchanging data and ideas with those research organizations all over the world, not only within this country, but all over the world. Through our embassies and consular access, we are in touch with them.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much. Our chamber to deliver him the memento, please. Due to some urgent work, Mr. Dotto will be leaving now, and I am requesting our past president, Mr. Alok Mukherjee, to please come and take the chair. Sustainability Conclave 2013 has the overall focus on energy security, empowering the energy future. As energy is essential for growth and development, it has come to be recognized as a strategic commodity. The uncertainty of its supply can threaten the effective functioning of an economy, as we are noticing now. It therefore becomes an imperative for a country to ensure secure energy supplies at affordable rates. India's discourse on energy security so far has been primarily framed by three issues: energy demand due to economic growth, energy poverty in the country, and the implications of its energy paths on the environment. The forces that have influenced India's economic growth over the last 2 decades have also led to a paradigm shift in the energy policy of the country. Hence, we thought the best way to commence our conclave would be to have an inaugural panel discussion on energy security, the intersection of demand, energy markets, and supply routes, involving some of the iconic personalities in the energy policy realm of the country. We have with us as panelist and guest of honor Dr. Kirit S. Parikh, former member Planning Commission and Chairman Integrated Research and Action for Development. Sri Sunil Mitra, former Revenue and Finance Secretary, Government of India, and former Power Secretary, Government of West Bengal. And Mr. Phil Marker, Councillor and Head, Energy, Climate and Growth Unit, British High Commission, New Delhi. Dr. Parikh is a legend in the world of economic and energy policy. He is the architect of the contemporary energy policy for India and the leading proponent of the system of market-driven pricing of petroleum products in India. Dr. Parikh is former founder director, Vice Chancellor of Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research, Mumbai, an advanced research institute, and has been honored with Padma Bhushan by the President of India in March 2009. A fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India, Dr. Parikh has a Doctor of Science in Civil Engineering and a master's degree in economics from MIT, USA. He was the chairman of the Integrated Energy Policy Committee, Planning Commission, and a member of the Economic Advisory Council of several Prime Ministers of India. In 2003, he was made honorary life member of the International Association of Agricultural Economists. On an average, it is given to 2% in a year in the world. A recipient of numerous awards, he has also been honored as the most distinguished and illustrious alumna of the decade from India by MIT in September 2007. He was also Special Economic Advisor to the Administrator UNDP, New York, among his many prominent roles in leading global research institutions. Dr. Parikh had been the editor of the India Development Report, which provides the non-governmental assessment of India's development and policy options. Dr. Parikh has authored, co-authored, edited numerous books, and the list goes on and on. Our second panelist is someone who has been very closely associated with the power sector, energy issues, and the nation's finances at the topmost level of policy making. Sri Mitra does not need any introduction to us. Sri Mitra, a former Additional Chief Secretary of Bengal, has also worked in the Ministry of Defense, served as a Secretary, Disinvestment and Revenue and Finance Secretary, apart from holding many other posts. He has not only been one of the key architects of the Union budget, but has had a wide and great experience in the workings of the power sector. As our third distinguished panelist, we have with us Mr. Phil Marker, Councillor and Head, Energy, Climate and Growth Unit, British High Commission, New Delhi. His previous position was in London at the UK's Department for International Development, leading on DFID's work on conflict policy, humanitarian issues, including leading the UK government's humanitarian response to the Haiti earthquake, Pakistan flood and Libya crisis. Mr. Marker was responsible for a team of 75 staff members and a budget of £160 million. He has worked for DFID for 14 years with postings in India, 98 and 2000, Bangkok, working on Cambodia, Burma, 2003-2005, and Democratic Republic of Congo from 2005 to 2009. Phil qualified in biological science and energy technology for developing countries. He has completed a part-time diploma in public finance and leadership and qualified as an accountant member of the Chartered Institute for Public Finance and Accountancy. With this introduction, may I now request Dr. Parikh to initiate the discussion. Thank you.
So how do we conduct this? First give some 10 minutes introduction each one and then we can have discussions on this. Okay. So let me set the stage. First of all, Shri Manish Gupta ji and friends. I think we have to look at energy security from a variety of perspectives. One can define energy security as a stage in which every individual gets lifeline energy and others get energy above that at competitive prices under all with a given degree of confidence under the kind of risk that one can normally accept or expect. One does not provide that under any condition we will be able to provide energy, because there may be really unprecedented events under which we may not be able to provide energy. But under what can one expect at normal kind of things, we should be able to provide, say, with a certainty of 99% or 98% or whatever it is, energy to all. If you look at it that way, then we have to think about what are the kind of risks under which this energy provision can be disrupted. And we can have three kinds of risk. One can define a risk, first risk as a supply risk. That is, even when you have the money to buy the energy that you need,